So the Triad Wars 2 semifinals has reached a third game after two really, really high quality ties in the first two. And again, the question is anyone going to change hands? Is anyone going to change decks? What will we see? Of course, in the AI semifinal, we saw last time that Sephiroth defeated Lenneth and will face the winner of this match, though we don't know whether the winner of this match will be determined in this game or, game 12 in 4 weeks. So a few things, I'm adding some things to the graphics. We're now adding little avatars to make it clearer who's playing which side. So you can see Turds is Quetzalcoatl in the top left. Turds often had Quetzalcoatl as his avatar, and Delial is Gur, though I'm not sure how it's pronounced, Gear, G-I-R, from Invader Zim, which I have promised him I will try to watch in the near future, and I will have some understanding of at some point in the top right. Turds has gotten first turn again this game, and Delial has switched decks. So Turds is stuck with his 7-7-7-6-5 strategy, and interesting, you'll notice Delial has also switched to a 7-7-7-6-5, suggesting, given that both players gravitated towards it, also it is what Sephiroth used to beat Lenneth. Some case to be made that 7-7-6-5 is where the best players will eventually go on this kind of set. That level 8 is not that valuable here. But I'm not sure how true that is, but it is an interesting thing to note here. Delial has switched to FF9. I have, in very bad form, have taken a few quotes from players in private chats to me, and I'm publishing them here. I don't think they'll mind. I will probably ask before putting up the video, but if I don't, they'll have evidence. They'll be able to call me out here. But Turds mentioned, between him and me, and now shared with all of you, that FF9 was also his backup deck here. And I think it's interesting because when I was looking through decks, FF9 jumped out to me, which is why I made it one of the AI's hands. And Delial switches to it here, and Turds also has prepared multiple hands with it as well for the set. Because Turds, who I think is just very well prepared for tournaments in general, but especially these, made sure to have, here's the decks, here's a quick sheet of what I'm interested in different decks. Alright, Dragon Quest is jumping out at me, FF9 is jumping out at me. Let's put together a few hands and maybe a few cards I could switch out in each. And just really good, thoughtful preparation on it, and moved quickly, and quicker than Delial did, to this 7-7-7-6-5, which seems to be a very popular thing, though maybe they'll move off it in future games. So Turds' first, if we get to future games. So Turds' first turn here has stuck with his Dragon Quest hand from last game. Last time he started with 2-2, 8-8, and 2. He does not choose to repeat it here, but he does calculate a really interesting line I want to jump to, which is he was looking at 2-2, 8-8, and 3. This card is safe, but he does not have the recaptures. So if Delial can play in 5 and set up captures on it from both sides, it is potentially very risky because he has the recapture in 2 but not in 6. So if Delial can set it both ways, it's trouble, and if he goes 2-2, 8-8, and 3, then Delial has the option of 5-8, 7-2, and 5, which sets up a plus in 2 and a plus in 6. And he thought this was risky, but he kept calculating and came up with 8-3, 5-7, and 9. And this isn't what ended up happening, but I just wanted to jump to this position because this is actually a brilliant line. I think it works. It sets up 5-7, 5-7 to have 6. So he now does have a card for 6. 5-7, 5-7 also works in 2. And 7-6-4-4 kind of works as a threat in 8 because it can combo the card in 5. He's forced a card out of the opponent's hand that gives a 7 down in a middle row, which is 7-6-4-4 loves to see. So a really neat setup move here, and actually, of Blue's 4 moves in the obvious square of 6, only one of them ties. And it's actually not 7-6-4-8 or 4-8-3-8, which both look like pretty safe moves with some AI testing, pretty clear they both lose. So a really brilliant idea justifying a corner that looks like it can be punished, but seeing that one move further than most players, I think including myself here, would think to look, and finding a really creative, strong idea. So I just wanted to highlight that because I thought it was a sweet idea. Instead, he ends up going for 8-3, 5-7, and 5. And this was kind of funny because Delial was talking on the first turn. He was saying, really interested to see what Turds will do here. Don't see an obvious starter for him. And Turd similarly was looking at the corner starters. He was looking at, 2, 2, 8, 8, and 3, which we've talked about, but also looked at a bunch of other moves. Looked at 5, 8, 7, 4, and 1, which is the starter his hand is best set up to be able to plus wall back. But Delial also has the plus walls, has the plus wall from 4, and can set up stuff in 2, and that starts looking a bit dangerous. It seems like Delial probably is going to have that pretty well covered. Looked at 8, 3, 5, 7, and 9, which looks a bit strange because there's no recapture from 6, but weighing, is it worth it to try to... No, that was last game he was looking at that. Sorry. Yeah, that was from last game, where he was trying to draw the 4, 9, 9, 3 out. I did mention that last time. Sorry about that, just getting confused. So looking at a bunch of corner ideas here, though not necessarily the ones I'm babbling on about. The games are all blurring together a little in my head. But ends up going for 8, 3, 5, 7, and 5, which was funny. Oops, sorry, skipping around. But was funny because Delial in this position was saying, really want to get 4, 8, 3, 8, and 5. I think my hand is really dependent on achieving that. A lot of my cards, like 6, 3, 6, 7, can play off that 3 and that 4 facing up and down from the squares above it, below it. And cards like that, and cards can play off the sideways 8s. And I think if I get that card in 5, I can set up against most things. So if he does something like 5, 8, 7, 4, and 1, or 5, 8, 7, 4, and 7, I'm just going to play 4, 8, 3, 8, and 5, and turn my brain off, and just, it may not be a win or anything, but I think I'll have control of the resulting game really nicely. Really want to get that card into 5, really think my hand will just click after that happens. And so he started thinking, the most likely move for Turds to play is going to be a move in 3 or 9, something where 4, 8, 3, 8, and 5 doesn't set up as well against it. We already talked a little about a move in 3, where 5, 8, 7, 2, and 5 is the obvious setup, but that would prevent Delial from getting the card he really wants to get into 5 there. And so he said, very shortly before Turds made his move, 3 or 9 incoming, wait for it. And then Turds plays in 5, and Delial goes, wow, that's kind of embarrassing. But this achieves the kind of the same thing. Of course, 4, 8, 3, 8 cannot fit in 5. It also does a few other things, right? Turds' kind of key threat here is 2, 2, 8, 8, and 3. And both players identified, in the line we just saw from Turds, and in a bunch of Delial's calculations in this position, that 2, 2, 8, 8, and 3 is the really big threat in Turds' hand that Delial cannot control. That Delial has no pressure on, no play against. Unless he has the setup in 5. And of course 5, 8, 7, 2, and 5 was the perfect setup there, and what Turds does here is he blocks that square. And he blocks that square using up the card he thinks is going to have least play here. And it makes some sense why that is. The 7, 6, 4, 4 has some play, there are still some downward 7s hanging around. The 6, 4 part is good against sideways 8s, and given that there are 2 4s, it might be a little better against those 8s than the 8, 3, 5, 7, 7, 5 component. And its 5, 3 component is never playing that well because neither side has any upward 8s. So that part isn't going to play that well for plus walling. So you can see that the 7, 6, 4, 4 might have a little more potential despite being a generally weaker card than the 8, 3, 5, 7. It blocks a square Delial really wanted, and it blocks a square that Delial could potentially use as a counter to the corner of 2, 2, 8, 8 that Turds most wanted to play. And I think that's most of the reasoning behind the move. If Turds sent me more thoughts on why he went with this one, I don't remember, and I should have checked more detailed. And Delial plays a really interesting reply. I thought this was a fascinating move of this weak corner of 7, 6, 4, 8, and 1. And he sort of said, like, bear with me here, and didn't give much explanation. So I'm going to try to sort of give my feel for why he played this move. The one thing he really mentioned was it's really easy to forget that 5, 8, 7, 2 is a plus wall in 2, but that might be relevant later. Similarly, 5, 8, 7, 4 for Turds has a plus wall in 2. So he mentioned it gives the plus in 4. It looks like I'm setting up 6, 3, 6, 7, and 4. But he's also said I'm basically never going to play that in 4. That is not what I want in 4 at all. He doesn't actually want to flip the card in 5. He thinks Turds, for instance, with the plus wall in 2, but some other ways, is going to have immediate access to that card in 5. It's going to be able to do things if I flip it. My goal is not to flip it. I do not want that combo. Hopefully he's scared of that combo, but it actually isn't what I want here. was basically the main thing he said. So looking for other ideas. One point of this weak corner is, I think one reason for it is it plays against the center specifically, not because it's setting things up or anything like that, but because Turds has just used his corner for 9, right? He's used up some up left power. So even though it's not providing particularly difficult numbers to take in the top left, it is saying you used up power in this direction. Your ability to do stuff here is now going to be limited. Another thing I think it does nicely is it, like, if you look for half safety after the starter, if we go back to the prior position and we think, like, which slide along plays, you know, in the side squares would be safe if one side was blocked. So one card to look at is like 4-8-3-8 in 2 or 8, but 5-7-5-7 covers that both ways. The next one to look at is 7-2-8-7. It's the next most powerful vertically or horizontally in either 4 or 6. And in 6, it's safe to 9, but not to 2-2-8-8 and 3, which is, again, just the problem. And last game, Turds identified 2-2-8-8 as his weakest card, and he wanted to use it immediately. Here, he very much recognizes it as a strong card and does not want to spend it this time on the first turn. And the other square for 7-2-8-7 is 4, which is safe to 7, but not safe to 1. And so blocking either 1 or 3 can potentially, like, threatens a future safety, right? It creates a half safety. And I think that's a really big benefit to Delial in playing in either of those squares. Other than that, I'm not entirely sure of the reasoning. I think it's a good move. I think there's certainly lots of possibilities here and lots of other good moves as well. But it makes sense as a way to create half safeties. And so now from Turds' perspective, the question is sort of, does he want to force the action with some move nearby, maybe in 2 or 4 or in 3 or 7, or does he want to play more distantly, setting up a J in 6 or 8, or a far corner play in 9? And of the J's, the one that jumps out to me is 6 seems kind of appealing, because 5-7-5-7 could sweep side to side. And I think there's some argument for that, but the lines ended up looking not that appealing to him, and I think they're okay, but not that appealing. He does control the pocket of 2 and 3, which is really important. If he keeps the 5-7-5-7 and the 5-8-7-4 in his hand, but then he has to use up a card he might want for later. Maybe the 7-6-4-4 is the best there, but it's always difficult to make a move that gives them a plus wall in 3 when it doesn't give you any plus walls. I'm not sure it's so good. So, and if you play an 8, you're directing the game up-down, and the 5-7-5-7 won't be nearly as good, and the 5-7-5-7 looks really strong here. It plays great against Taharka, the 4-8-3-8, it plays great against Cinna, the 5-8-7-2. Delial mentioned that card's going to be a nightmare for me, and I think another reason he played Silver Dragon in 1 was to get a card with a sideways 8 out of his hand without that 8 being touchable by Turds' 5-7-5-7. Which, as anyone who's played level 7 knows, can be a very bothersome card to play against. So that limits a few options. I think actually another reason for the move in 1 is it sort of discourages a play in 3 because it gives Delial the free square in 2. And Delial really wanted to do something that would discourage 2-2-8-8's dominance in 3. And even though he doesn't attack it right now, if Turds goes there, Deli does get 2 for free, and that's going to be some significant compensation. And so trying to discourage that, though I think 2-2-8-8 and 3 would have been a fine move here. The J's don't look that appealing. Turds did look at forcing the action at saying, you have better stuff in 4, and that might not be the combo. You know, I think both players realized, Delial explicitly, but I think Turds as well, that 6-3, 6-7, and 4 may not be the big threat. It's probably the safety of 7-2-8-7 and 4. So Turds looked at just like, what if I just block 4? What if I just force the action? Can I see my way to some clear thing? And there's some clear benefits to this move. You know, if Delial wants to take 2 and lock in the card in 1, you know, 4-8-3-8 can be comboed back. 7-2-8-7 or 6-3-6-7 has such a weak number facing out towards 3 that Turds could then follow up with 2-2-8-8 and 3, lock in the card in 2, have a very strong number. Now maybe it's not quite locked if there's some kind of setup against 5, but that's pretty unlikely here, it looks like to me. So I think looking at 4 was really smart and a rare square to kind of look at here, and he didn't end up going there, but it made a lot of sense to consider. But there's not a card that really naturally fits. 5-7-5-7 looks like it is really good play, so it's hard to use up. 2-2-8-8 is really important in the follow-up. 5-8-7-4 can be comboed back immediately. Now I think that still might be okay for Turds. I think he has good moves in both 2 and 8, and still has the 2-2-8-8, which is going to be pretty strong at the end. But that's a very scary move to make, 5-8-7-4 and 4. And 7-6-4-4 and 4 looks pretty weak. It's giving up, you know, any card. Like, it's pretty soft to 7, though maybe the 5-7-5-7 keeps that under control. It's potentially really soft to combos down the road because it doesn't have a strong number facing towards 5. So I think 4 was a really interesting square to look at. Not a bad option at all, but not a square people generally look at, so I think a really smart thing to consider. So after considering all these options in quite extensive detail, Turds ends up deciding to play 2-2-8-8 and 9. And this is a complicated move because it gives a lot of combo options. It sets up 7-6-4-4 really well. It has the double capture in 6. Every card of his has a double capture in 6, and also has the plus wall to capture both in 8. 5-7-5-7 also has a capture in 8. 5-8-7-4 has the same in 8 and also double captures in 6. So this seems like one of those moves of how can I play a corner that I have really good access to and you don't, while still giving me good access to the cards you played in 1. Makes a lot of sense. I think it puts him in a difficult position. So Deli's immediate instinct was to play 7-2-8-7 in 4, which I think is very strong and maybe the best move. And then he started thinking, but he used his down power. He no longer has this threat in 3. Maybe I can use 7-2-8-7 and 6. That looks really strong too. But maybe Turds' Q is going to be good enough to hold a tie, or maybe even put me under pressure. But both these moves looked really tempting to Deli. It was kind of funny because Turds said, I bet Deli's looking at 6 here, and 30 seconds later, Deli sent me a message saying, 6 is looking really tempting here. And this happened a few times. This is just one instance I remember where they both calculated for like 5 minutes, and one went, I think this is what they're thinking about. The other went, yep, that is what I'm thinking about, completely in separate chats to me. And it was just fun to see in complicated positions, because this is a position where every square is possible to play in, you know. I think one of the things about corner and center plays, and especially if it continues with the opposite corner, but also if it continues with a far side, is there are so many possible options. It's just really hard to calculate all of, and you have to have just such a good feel for what matters, because you're never going to calculate all of this. I'm going to talk about this more in detail in another video, but if there are 3 moves left in a game, and you can calculate every option, let's say, within a minute, which is pretty fast. There's 24 possible variations. So to calculate everything in a minute, there are 6 possible moves. That's 10 seconds a move. That's 2.5 or 2.25 seconds of variation, somewhere in that range. You know, it's pretty fast to be able to calculate every possible move left in 1 minute with 3 moves left. But let's say you're that fast. To calculate everything with 4 moves left is going to take you 12 minutes. To calculate everything with 5 moves left is going to take you 3 hours. And to calculate everything with 6 moves left, as we see here, there are 24 options, so that's going to take you 72 hours to calculate literally every variation. So this is not doable, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to figure out what's the key moves, what's the key ideas, and you can start calculating those out fully, but it's going to be narrow, it's going to be focused, it's going to be really your understandings of these positions, your spotting of where the combos are going to be and which combos are going to matter. Both players have sames in 5. Delial has this, both players have plus walls in 2. Delial has a plus in 4, and actually a weird plus in 6 with 7-2-8-7. You know, there's potential plus walls down the road. 5-7-5-7 is still going to play well against the 4-8-3-8 or the 5-8-7-2 down the road. There's so much going on. It is not humanly possible to see anywhere near all of, and it's going to be so reliant on feel and these deep understandings. And, you know, it's just very complicated to handle these positions. And in my testing, messing around with AI, I've noticed that when there's a card in a corner and a card in the center, games are just decisive a lot more often than they are in other setups. It's just if you need to play for a win or a loss, this is the kind of setup where it's just much more likely to have a decisive result, because it's so very complicated and so hard to find lines that quickly clarify into something straightforward. So maybe if Delial goes in 6 and Turds goes in 8 and we get a Q, and maybe that's easy to comprehend relatively to anything else from this position, but there's so many options. You know, if Deli goes in 6, maybe Turds goes in 4, right? And so after Delial's move, maybe Turds has a chance to clarify the position, though maybe he doesn't. Sometimes the Qs or the Zs or the Xs just don't have clear answers to them. But it's going to be a very difficult position to play, and Delial ends up, after both of them clearly focusing on 6 and maybe 4, ends up playing a very strange and very complex move that leaves us all reeling and looking for something to do. At this point, Delial said, "I still don't, but want to see what he does. Don't die, Colin." And we're all rooting for you, Colin. I just thought those messages were funny, so I thought I'd share them. But this is just about the most complex option you can imagine. 1, if 5 ever flips, it's now going to be super vulnerable to combos either way, so the game is very likely to be dependent on who has some big combo on 5 at the end, because 5 is likely to flip, and then it's going to affect 2, and it's going to affect 1, and it might affect the card that goes in 3, and it's just going to swing so hard. 2, it gives Turds a combo that Delial cannot, naturally combo back. He has to combo back by affecting 5, right? It gives Turds this combo in 3 that Delial himself does not have. Not that he probably needs it, because he would need to flip 5, have Turds flip it back for him to need the combo back in 3, because that's the only way 2 gets flipped. But that could easily happen here. And so he doesn't have the combo back in 3, and Turds does have the combo in 3. So just naturally very complex move. But also, we can start to get to why this creates real difficulties for Turds. Because if Turds takes the combo in 3, if he plays 5-7, 5-7 in 3, Delial can take back everything in 6. 7-2-8-7 flips literally everything. It pluses the cards in 5 and 9, which means it flips 1 and 2 as well as overpowering and comboing the card in 3. So it flips everything. So Turds takes 2 cards. Turds goes up 7-3. Delial flips back the whole board, would take an 8-2 lead. Turds can combo back an 8 there with the same, which will flip everything but the card in 6. And so Turds will take a 7-3 lead, and then Delial will play the plus in 4, and Turds will take back in 7 on the last turn. And if you can count that all up, I believe it ends up with a 6-4 win for Deli, and Turds cannot go in 3. But this is a nightmare to calculate, and really speaks to what a stupidly complicated move Delial played in 2. Another obvious kind of square to try is say, okay, I'm not going to, give up my combo in 3 so early when there's so many combos back. Let's block 8. But I think every move in 8 doesn't really work. And the huge problem is that 7-2-8-7 is going to be so good in 1 of 4 or 6, and that Delial has this combo in 4 also with 6-3-6-7, which he said he would never do, but does keep coming up, that Turds cannot combo back. So 8, I think, just entirely loses. I think 3 loses. We're left with 4 as the other standard formational option. And this is better, but it's really a weird square to play in. 7-6-4-4 is so vulnerable to combos. 5-8-7-4 can immediately be comboed back by Cinna. And is the fact that you have a combo in 3 later good enough? Unclear, really complicated position. 5-7-5-7 uses up your sweeper for the bottom, which going into a queue, you probably want to keep your sweepers down there. So it's a difficult square to play in. And I think this is a really tough scenario. And so what does Turds do? Turds plays in 7. And I didn't screenshot it, I don't think, but Delial immediately goes, nice! Just immediately delighted to see another move adding to the complexity. And this kind of turns the tables, because now Turd still has that threat in 3, just kept in the air, but he's creating new threats too. He's creating a same in 4 with 5757. He's creating a plus in 8 for 7644. Suddenly, a lot of squares where Deli had the better combos, Turds now does. And the only square where Deli really is just clearly better at comboing here is now 6 with his 7287. And everywhere else, Turds has at least as good combo potential as Deli, maybe better. And he has last turn, when it's often really good to have all the combo potential. So looking at a few lines, what are some obvious moves? Well, Delial might be really tempted to play in 4 with 7287. But if Deli goes in 4 there, Turds can often just combo back in 3 and be in great shape, sometimes winning, sometimes tying. If Deli goes in 8, Turds can often just block 4 and is in fine shape. Though there was some really weird line I found where, what was it? Should have written down. So if Deli goes 5-8, 7-2 in 8, he takes an 8-2 lead. Now, Turds can take back a lot of things in 4 with 5-7, 5-7, but that would be a disaster because then 7-2-8-7 combos stuff back and he's given up the card for 3. And if Turds uses 7-6-4-4 in 4, he doesn't flip anything, and Deli can just block kind of wherever and should be fine or in good shape. So I think 5-8, 7-2, and 8, I think Turds can't go in 4 without losing. And I think his only tie there is 7-6-4-4 in 6, the last square you'd look. Just a really complex way to tie it. Keeping 5-7, 5-7 for 3, which still combos 1 and 2, and locking in that card in 9, which is going to be just enough to get the tie there. Yeah, I think it's 5-8, 7-2, and 8. The only tie is 7-6-4-4 and 6. Which again, you know, they have 9 minutes, would have been found if that was the way this game went. It ends up going in a little different direction. But you can see how this is just absurdly complicated position for 4 moves left. And like, you know, Delial could make a normal move in 4 and just lose. But Delial could make a weird move in 8 and force Turds to have to find a crazy tie in 6. And I think that just speaks to how complicated this is. And also speaks to, again, on the calculation thing, if it takes you 1 minute to calculate any 3-move position, then it's going to take you 12 minutes to calculate any 4-move position. Delial only has 9 minutes here to deal with Turds' very complex play. And Delial himself's very complex play. And this is a really messy position where, you know, the obvious moves can lose and these subtle moves can almost win, and it's very strange. And Delial sends a message of like, this looks like a win, but there's no win. And Turd sends one of, I think this is good and even gives me winning chances. And then sent, maybe he has a weird idea in 6. No, I think I can survive there. And then Delial indeed does find a weird idea in 6 and sends me the message, I think I broke my own brain. 6 is, of course, the last square you look at in these structures. The natural square is 4. The second one you look at is 3 or 8. And in this kind of one, it's even harder to look at 6. Because so often in like an X setup, like the basic heuristic of an X is there are kind of 3 types of squares. There's a square where I have a combo and they don't. There's a squares where they have a combo and I don't. And there's squares where we both have combos. And the kind of strategy of an X, generally speaking, I think is block squares they have combos and I don't, and leave open squares I have combos they don't. And secondarily, if you don't have many squares you have open and they don't, maybe leave open squares you both have open. But definitely as soon as you can, block the squares they have open and you don't. And in this position, with cards in 1, 4, with squares open in 1, 4, 6, and 8, 8 was the square Delial had and Turds didn't, right? You know, 4 is a square both players have. It makes some sense to block. 8 is a square both players have. It makes some sense to block. 3 is a square Turds has and Delial doesn't. It makes a lot of sense to block. 6 is not only the hardest square to find a move in these setups, but it's even harder in this exact one because it's a square Delial has and Turds doesn't. It's the square you most want to leave open. And yet, it's a brilliant move, and Turds immediately realizes, and he had seen the move too, these are both brilliant players, that this does win for Delial. And the key is basically that Turds doesn't have a capture of 6 from 3. And so if Turds wants to go in 4, 7, 6, 4, 4 does nothing there for him. 5, 7, 5, 7 is good there, but then he has nothing at all for 3. So Turds just combos back in 8 and leaves him with 7, 6, 4, 4, and 3, which is just a dead card anywhere but 8 here. And kind of the key is if 7, 6, 6, 4, 4 can't go in 8, Turds is going to lose, and Delial is going to force him to have to play that card some square other than 8. And so the only kind of try that says I don't lose immediately based on 7, 6, 4, 4's weakness is to go an 8 with it immediately, which flips a whole bunch of things. It flips everything but the card in 6. But the problem with that is once you've flipped 2 and 3, you don't really have the combo threat there anymore, right? Because you flip, or 2 and 1, you flip 2, so Turds could just play, Deli could just play Sinna in 4. He doesn't actually combo the card in 5, and Turds has nothing to flip back at the end. So the real problem is being left with 7, 6, 4, 4. And I really like Turds move in 7. It does lose, and it was so close to the tying version, which was the very similar 7, 6, 4, 4 and 7 instead of 5, 8, 7, 4 and 7, which keeps just a slightly more powerful card in the hand, and everything just works slightly better because we're not left with quite the same dead card at the end. And so Turds ends up going in 3, which is, you know, as good a try as he had. He knows the game is over. Delial plays an 8, and Turds plays in 4. I think this was a tremendous game, really complicated, really interesting. The move in 6 is brilliant, and both players were good enough to realize 6 was an option, because 6 is such an easy move to scan past, both because it is the least likely square and because in this position especially it was even less likely, and you just don't have the time to consider everything, even in a 9-minute game, and so it's the last place you're going to look, and you're going to be rechecking other stuff before you look here because it's so much more likely to have an answer in another square. So I think this was brilliantly played. I still think this was really well played by both players. There are a couple, you know, little mistakes, of course, you can look at, but a phenomenal game. Delial said after his move in 6, if this wins, I'm counting it top 5 of mine all time. So we just got to see Delial play one of, in his opinion, and if anyone would know, he would know, one of the 5 best games he's ever played. You know, you can't play a completely brilliant game unless your opponent plays great too, because you just, the moves will be too obvious, the moves will be too clear. To have one of your best wins ever, you really have to be beating someone who's great and making it as hard as possible to win, making it as complex as possible. So these were awesome games. I think these were better than any of the games we've gotten against AI so far, though I think there have been some great games there too. But this was just a joy to watch, really complex. I think both fantastic players. I think a worthy game to have is, you know, to win a game like this, it was going to be a win like this. Deli was like, sorry for the miracle move afterwards. Just brilliant play. We got it all recorded. I really hope you enjoyed watching this because this is some phenomenal triple triad and was really a pleasure for me. So long. That's our semifinal. It feels like it should have been the final. It feels like I just went through a lot. We all went through a lot. Delial broke his brain. But we do have the finals still to come. It's going to be an AI versus human, Sephiroth versus Delial. The AI is all automated at this point. I'm going to be putting together the hand and the rule set soon for the AI. I don't know what the rule set's going to be yet, so I can't advertise it here. But I hope it lives up to this match, and I don't think it will because it's so hard to live up to this match. But what a great match. What a fantastic semifinals. I'd like to think this is one of the best and most interesting semifinals of Triple Triad that's been played, and I think it may have been, and we got it on record, so that's super cool. Thanks so much to Delial and Turds for playing, and all the other humans too, but especially these two, because this was, I think, a really special sequence of games. And Cheers.